Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important, and I appreciate those who reach out. And feel free to reach out to me. The two ways you can do that is through email and YouTube. And also, as I mentioned, I'm working on an advertising piece to put out there to promote my podcast. So when all of that is said and done and launched, I will let you know everything about that and how and where to look out for it. All right, so it's Friday, so I'm focusing in on everyone that listens. I appreciate all of y'all immensely. This podcast wouldn't be what it is if it weren't for all of you. So, this is the new year, so I am continuing on the different topic. So this time I'm going to focus in on literature, and particularly literature from my brothers and sisters out there from Canada. Here we go. Oh, Canada. Cheesy, I know. But, there's something good or bad here that is very interesting about the culture of Canada. Now, as I mentioned before here, literature is a good way if the writer is open to doing that and willing to do that, to be a social compass, really, of the culture. Now, it goes with the territory that you get images that conjure in mind from certain cultures. And Canada is really pronounced with that, anywhere from wintry scenes to maple syrup to hearty breakfast items as bacon and so forth. Canada is involved with that, and it has particularly with the Winter Olympics. But getting back to the aspects of literature, the literature that is produced, came out of Canadian writers, is an extension to see a different view of Canadian culture. So, with that little introductory, I'm going to get into a broad view about Canadian literature, and then I'll get into specifics next week. All right, so I'm a bit under the weather, so forgive me for the way I sound right now here. Okay, so. All right, so. This is a history from JSTOR about, let's see. Okay, let me go about the right way. I don't think this source isn't what I thought it would be. Let me go into more specifics than that. All right, so this is from Britannica, and it is all about Canadian literature. So let's dive in here. So it says Canadian literature is the body of written works produced by Canadians, of course, reflecting the country's dual origin, which is the French origin here that we're talking about, the official bilingualism. So the literature of Canada can be split into two major divisions, English and French. All right. So, Canadian literature in English, prose and poetry, from settlement to 1900. So the first writers of English in Canada were visitors and explorers, travelers, and British officers and their wives who recorded their impressions of British North America in charts, diaries, journals, and letters. These foundational documents of journeys and settlements passage the documentary tradition in Canadian literature in which geography, history, and voyages of exploration and discovery represent the quest for myths of origins for our personal and national identity. So this is tied a lot to the aspects of, specifically when we get into this time here, of America. In the aspects, I'm looking at this from an American lens here with, it was a great exploration age in discovering new territory and understanding how to make this each its own. And, that's really interesting when you spread that out globally to what does that mean to each culture. And so let's get into more depth about this. So it says, as the critic Northrop Frye observed, Canadian literature is haunted by the overriding question, where is here? Thus, a metaphoric mapping of peoples and places became central to the evolution of Canadian literature and imagery. The earliest documents were adorned natives of travel and exploration, written in plain language. These accounts document heroic journeys to the vast unknown west and north and encounters with Inuit and other native people, called First Nations in Canada, often on behalf of the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company, the great fur trading companies. So you get the tundra, with the Americas, but then the aspects of the wintry depictions of Canada is really pronounced when we go into explorations of different territories in Canada, where it goes from Winnipeg, it goes from Ontario, and so forth. All right, so okay to do. As I said, now the explorer Samuel Heron wrote a journey from Prince to Wales Forth in Hudson Bay to the Northern Ocean in 1795, and Sir Alexander Mackenzie, an explorer and fur trader, described his travels and voyages from the Montreal through the continent of North America to the frozen and Pacific Oceans in 1801. Now, personal journals and entries like that are very vastly fascinating to me. The aspects that they are somewhat of an insert of the subconscious and the conscious mind working it. Well, no, that's wrong to say. The conscious mind getting into the expression of what they see, what they understand, and how to make sense of everything. It can be in itself a uncensored, biased attempt to document something. All right, so to the frozen and Pacific Oceans, 1801, Simon Fraser recorded details of his 1808 trip west to Fraser Canyon. The letters and journals of Simon Fraser of 1806 to 1808, all the way to 1960. Captain John Franklin's published account of a British naval expedition to the Arctic, native of a journey ashore to the Polar Sea, also are depictions of the Arctic imagery that is very much showcased about the Canadian heritage. All right, so and now moving on to the modern period. Now, in the early 20th century, popular poets responding to the interest in local depictions of French Canadian customs and culture and dialect inhabited that or delved into that. So W.H. Drummond, The Habitant, and other French Canadian poems, particularly in 1897 when this produced the Mohawk Tribe and Rituals, and again with Pauline Johnson, Legends of Vancouver in 1911, and again with Flint and Feather in 1912, all depict, what do they have in common? They freedom and romance of the North. Alright, so going on to John McCrae's account of World War I in Flanders Field in 1915 remains Canadians' best known poem. Alright, so it is quite interesting with the aspects of World War I. So that was the I guess you could say the test of will and determination for how does a whole nation, different nations, combat when there's a lot of political turmoil, country turmoil within it, and how do those things resolve itself, and what are the best solutions. And in World War II, coming in the midst was a recant to that, or reaction to that, I think, for the most part. But you all feel free to weigh in about this subject matter here. So, okay. Alright, so slowly a reaction against sentimental patriotism and derived Victorian verse set in. Alright, so we're getting on to a new aspects air about Canadian literature here. So E.J. Pratt created a distinctive style both in lyric poems of Seabound Northland Life, which was released in 1923. In the epic narratives of the Titanic of 35, and forgive me for the pronunciation of his, Beowulf and his brethren in 1940, and towards the last spike of 1952. Which though there, and then the Titanic, oh my goodness. Now, you know, the movie when it came out, if y'all seen it, who haven't, I personally have never really seen that movie. I just heard, especially when I was, it was, you know, even though I was a kid when it came out, you know, it just was a worldwide thing because, well, I'll take that back. You know, when you get into period pieces like Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor and so forth, you know, with the love and the romance, it wasn't really anything new, but it was just really different for its time in the aspects of how it depicted his historical pieces, like the Titanic. You know, when you get in the aspects of the romance and different dramatic differences in the aspects of classes and so forth. But also, you know, thinking about the Titanic. The Titanic in itself was a really good example of the aspects of modern innovation and what happens when okay, what's the best word to describe about this? Being, I guess, it's right in my mind, and it's aggravating when it happens. Being very, just in a rush because you have either something to prove or you have, you're very, very, very much, the best way I can describe that is the character trait that Lady Macbeth had. And her depiction in Shakespeare. So what do I mean by this? Now, Lady Macbeth, and then also with Samson and Delilah. Okay, now they both were opportunists, you can say the least, and they knew how to use their dispositions to their advantage, right? And so what both of these women had in common, they were driven for their own selfish gain. Now, how does this relate to the Titanic? Now, there's a lot of different perspectives about it, but for the most part, to wrap everything up here, it was a really good example of how common sense and the aspects of safety and thinking clearly goes out the window when you have the determination to do and super exceed something. And another really good example of this, even though I appreciate everything that NASA has given to our society, but the space program, that was a really good example of, hey, let's just go big, literally go big and go to the moon, in an example, in order to feat what's possible to do. And however we're going to do that, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be the first to do it. We're going to just do it, right? So that's quite interesting to have books that delve into these subject matters here. So another innovative and experimental poet, Brittany, published the frequency analog tragedy of David, the narrative David, in 1942. So the first of many audacious, technically varied poems exploring the troubling nature of humanity and the cosmos. His publications include the verse play Trial of City and Other Verses in 1952, and poetic collections such as Rag and Bone Shop in 1971 and Ghost in the Wheels in 1977. So Toronto's Canadian Forum, founded in 1920, which Brittany edited from 1936 to 1940, and Montreal's McGill-Vortney Review in 1925 to 1927, provided an outlet for the new poetry in the immersion of modernism. So here and their analog in New Providence, which was released in 1936, and A.J.M. Smith, F.R. Scott, and A.M. Klein began their long literary careers, emphasizing concrete image, poetry and language, and the aspects of free verse and poetry. Where, as far as putting color and patterns and beats and rhyme and rhythm in poetry here. So these modernists felt that the poet's take was to identify, name, and take possession of the land. Klein wrote in Portrait of the Poet and as Landscape in 1948 was the poet is in this, the ninth atom taking the green inventory in a world but sacredly uttered, naming, praising. So, in a nutshell, say you can take it for what you will with this, with the aspects of that. Going in the aspects of allegory with religious undertones here. It's saying as if what is God-given should be protected. Alright, so let's go on to novels. So by the 1990s, novels of local color were beginning to overshadow historical romances. Lucy Maud Montgomery's beloved children's book, Anne of Green Gables of 1908, and its sequel were set in Prince Edward's Island. Ontario towns and their garrison mentality provided the setting for Sarah Janet Duncan's portrayal of political life in The Imperialist, which was released in 1904. Ralph O'Connor's The Man from Glengarry in 1901, and Stephen Leacock's satire stories of Sunrise sketch of a little town in 1912. All right, so beyond 1960 and beyond. So after the 50s, the tentativeness in fiction either became itself the subject of novel or as a dispensation in more confident forms of writing. Robinson Davies' popular Deptford trilogy, The Fifth Business, examines the growth of its protagonist into maturity. All right, so the exploration of Canadian identity and of the world of art. For much of the interest came to Davies with the Cornish trilogy. And also, again, with the Rebel Angels in 1981 and What Bread and Bone in 1985. All right, so many writers publishing in the 60s and 70s subverted the traditional conventions of fiction, shifting from realist to surrealist as a self-reflecting and in the aspects of going on top subject matters of feminism and the aspects of the mood and the shift of the historical landscape in that time. All right, so when we get into the 80s and the 90s, writers also went into the self and the nation and belonging and the aspects of belonging and loss and disillusion and so forth, and merging these two in the genres. So Robert Gorish's trilogy of the words of my Warwick in 1966, and the Shorehorse Man in 1969, and God Idiot in 1973, transformed the realism of prairie fiction into postmodern parodies of the quest of journey. Now I'm going to end on this. So, it's quite interesting when you get into the aspects of merging old ideas with new and modern takes. Now, a really good example, I think, now I'm speaking from an American point of view, is the aspects of Western film. Now, Western film and television took a dramatic difference when we get into the 60s. We get into the late 60s on to the 70s, and then what we see today. In the aspects of having things like spaghetti westerns and so forth, when it's redefining what's good, what's bad, what's the nuance behind all of these things, and having these reflection in the aspects of man against nature and all these nuance into Canadian literature, renounced into the aspects of exploring, the thought conscience behind Canadian culture and literature. Now, with this said, I'd like to know what you all think, so I'm going to end it right here. Feel free to reach out to me, and the best way to do so is through email and YouTube. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.